Good morning from America. This is your weather woman meteorologist, Amy Metz. We are looking at tropical cyclone Freddy today in depth. We can see there's an eye wall now. That is the one on the map that is going to be the worst as far as the cyclones go now. There has been a lot of space weather lately, 4X class flares since the year began, and there's a lot of information about what all of this means to us weather wise and beyond on my group Space and Earth Weather. You can find that from my Weather Woman page on Facebook. Whether you have an account there or not, you can access this information here and find out more and also join in on the conversation. So I'll come to the comments feeds here a lot during my live streams to answer questions. So this, though, is what we are focusing on for today. Tropical Cyclone Freddy is on its way toward Madagascar. It had already formed near very, very hot Australia. So this is their cyclone season. It's really warming up more than 100 degrees, more than 38 degrees Celsius in this part of the world the next couple of days. There's another heat wave coming around the weekend. So this has already passed. Now that Freddy is further west, it becomes the territory of other forecasting zones. So once it passes India, it will then land in the zone of Africa. So going toward Madagascar is the trouble here. We've had some other storms not quite affecting Madagascar too strong yet, although this year they have been hit already. So they are under pressure now with this one a little bit stronger as we see some whites within the wind speeds here. What I have this on at windy.com is the wind gusts. I found that they are more accurate and representative of the actual wind speeds within these storms. And so what that is showing right now on this particular graphic then would be 97 knots. So we can change these here into different units for whatever people are comfortable with. Meters per second, maybe you want to do some derivations with that. Otherwise, we have miles per hour. That this storm right now in the center then has some strong wind gusts just around, 30. This right here, I wish the clicker would work. I'll make the clicker work now. There we go. Show weather picker, 113 miles per hour. And so that would be sustained winds are probably closer. So we can actually get more high resolution data, and I'll show you and we'll compare that in just a minute and look closer at Cyclone Freddy. So all of these links are in the description down below. I'm just kind of very quickly going through these and I'll come back to a couple of them because what we can do here is see things all around the world, what we're watching for next. And this one is going to phase out. This one could become more of an issue with Indonesia and Japan later with some extra rain, but really Freddy is the one to watch for right now with very strong storms. So Port Louis, this is one area that we want to watch for very quickly here in the next coming days, couple of days, because it could be affected before Madagascar. Now, I'll be looking closely during this forecast period with you guys here in the next few minutes at what track might be more probable and why. For now, I'm just showing a lot of different sources. And again, you can get these in the descriptions just so that people have access to this data. So these are a lot of different computer models and people have just learned different things about weather and how it works with mathematics so that we can get our forecasts. But you see that they're pretty different. So these different models have different input values. Some of them use information like including the space weather stuff here that I showed you earlier. Some of them don't, and they all come up with different answers. So we'll go over some examples as to why I would hone in on one of these more than another. And you can also kind of see that there's a trend. More of them are showing that this will probably be closer to this island here that is quite populated. So kind of giving you an idea of that island then. Here, it actually has a big, capital city. It's beautiful, gorgeous, gorgeous place. And I found a beautiful video that I'll just play for a second with a couple of these photos so you can see just kind of how maybe some strong waves might be able to crash over some of these gorgeous streets. And so in that case, it looks like, they've had steps built up. They I'm sure have dealt with plenty of floods before, but this one, depending on how strong and how close it gets, just might be able to flood some of the little lower levels of buildings, depending on how low they are. So that's what we'll be watching for here. there is a typical rainy side and more dry side to these storms. So there's some very specific drivers I'll be talking about then when it comes to the actual forecast of these things. So real quick, yeah, I just want to check and make sure there's no comments. I don't see any there. You can drop comments if you have any questions while I'm going to, and I'll keep looking back. So right now we have one of these warning graphics open that I've never actually used before. So I was curious if maybe I can get some information from here. But this is the very first one that I have in the description. And I'll see what kind of information they provide. So here's their tropical cyclone warning graphic. I can easily make this larger. And so these are very, not very easy to read when they come out this way, but they do show you specific answers as to what those gusts are recorded at. And we're seeing that 125 knots. So what I wanted to do was compare that in 120 knots here sooner. So you can see when these are valid from. They're going to have these in Zulu time, UTC, if you want to convert that into your time. This would be the 15th of February at 1200 Zulu or UTC. So in that case, the next one on top you can look at is a 0 Zulu. So they're coming out in order here. Then going down the line, you're going to see the forecasts for on the 18th now at 0 UTC, that they have this forecast to have gusts about the same, really, just actually dropping 5 knots. And so that actually is very representative to what we had looked at here. Now, sustained wind speeds, then jumping ahead to the 18th, like they were saying, remembering UTC would be a little different here, so I'll change the time code back up so you can see where this is in relation to that island we just looked at here. And again, the clicker. So I'm doing some just model forecasting, showing you stuff first, and next I'll dig into my own specific forecasting tools. And I've never gotten the hang of this new mouse, so excuse me for all that jumping around. So 142 miles per hour. It's very close to that forecast of knots. If I jump down to knots, 123. So yeah, these gusts, if you're going to use windy.com, I'm showing you this because you're going to want to switch to gust if you want to compare it to the sustained winds. Now, a lot of people in this part of the world use the kilometers per hour, so I will stick to that for now. So 229 kilometers per hour is what's forecast on Saturday. This is the European model, and it's been my favorite. Typically I don't start with models, but I am this time just because it's nice and quick, and I'm kind of in a hurry today. So I'll do this and I can show you what's out there and available, because I think that a lot of people are going to want to be watching this carefully with knowing if they need to pull crops in Madagascar or not, what to do with farms here, how to prepare for floods and landslides. So a lot of that information, again, you can find on my page, Weather Woman. I will always be sharing that kind of stuff. And you don't need an account, once again, just to find that stuff. So, and I also will be live streaming through any landfall. What I do is I let it look like this as these storms are heading toward land and there's a landfall going on. I'll leave this playing with the satellite loop, because in a lot of cases, if people lose power in their homes, and these things are coming in really strong, the wind can very easily let the power go off. And so in that case, you could still access some satellite information from your phones oftentimes and collect, information about how strong these are, where exactly the radar is, because I'll have the radar feed on here, which you can also find yourselves if you want to have this set up. So it says here, this is a new thing, live rain radar. Radar shows an accurate and real-time map of rain and snow. Coverage is limited, yes, because these are going to be using the ground stations. And so you can see these kinds of circular zones. So on land, a lot of these places have radar domes that will send a beam outward in a radial direction, it's called, so out in a circle. And then it sends that beam back, and it tells you if there's stuff in the air and kind of like the temperature, or you can get the size and use derived products to find out how fast these things are going. So that's what's going on here with once the storm gets around here, we'll start to see some of that rain coming in. And again, these are really small. So I'm going to switch back to satellite and show you just how dry it is around this area. Now that's a big thing I'm going to look at right now as I get into the forecasting portion of this, is that you don't see a lot of cloud cover ahead of this storm. So that's great. It does mean that once it hits, gets closer into all the moisture that's in South Africa, it can tap into that a little bit. Now they're going to be having some very strong storms in South Africa with this and in Madagascar. So as we head through the next couple of days, we'll be seeing that more and more, but more so once we get into next week. So for now, we're looking at the islands here, and I will head back to this website here. Right here, what I like is you can click on any of those storms, and then very quickly, I'll have to see if I can open this one right here in a new tab next to it. Let's see. I may or may not be able to do this how I set it up on my software to show you right now. Yeah, just open the same one. So here, what we can do then, I'm gonna add a different screen share option to my software that I'm streaming on, and then that way you can actually see what I'm looking at otherwise, because right now we have a couple different screens we can work with. If you click on that actual little cyclone icon, you'll see what I'm about to show you now. So turning on my screen share, I'm probably gonna have to change the size of something real quick too. So bear with me while I edit something real quick for you to see what I'm doing. Well, I've never done this live and show, and it's definitely not reacting the same. So quickly this guy, bring it here. Now there we go. So looking at this one, what I did is if you click on that little icon, then again is right here. Click on it, this will pop up into a new window. And from there, you can go up onto the top and you can choose so much different information from here. So the things that really drive these storms is going to be the mid-level winds. So that has to do, you can look at upper level winds if we want at first, but these are not these are not the easiest places to look at that. I like to use windy.com for that kind of stuff, for those trends. Wind shear is something that will kill a cyclone, basically. Like if it's intersecting these red lines, it's going to start deteriorating different levels of that storm. What this means when we look at this graphic is that, okay, we have our wind flowing in this direction. But then around the 10 that we see, the green, as we go from the water level down at the water and then we look up high in the sky, up where the jets fly, then we know that within just about 10 knots, within about 11 miles per hour, or not too much more kilometers per hour, that's how much the wind is changing with speed, and or there's some directional changes there. So for the most part, these streamlines look like they're all going the same, but then when it comes into the speeds, we're seeing that there's a lot of a different change on this part of the storm, and that will kind of tear it apart. It doesn't let it circulate the same and become stronger. So that's a good thing that it is riding along a situation here where there are some of the red lines where we're getting into the stronger shear. That's the stuff that will tear it apart even more. I have a ridiculous video on my YouTube you can see about wind shear. I think it was the first one I did on this channel. And so where I used an apple and a knife to show you wind shear. And so here we are with what's ahead, where the storm is going. There is a little bit more of that it has to ride through. And so that's going to help kill it. Now, dry air also will help kill this. So there's other places we can look at for the dry air. But here, real quick, I'm going to look at convergences. Yeah, there's a lot of incoming air there is what that tells me. So it is going to grow strong based on that, but it has that little, killer factor from the wind shear. And then dry air. So water vapor, we're seeing just one little snippet, one level here. There's other ways, I'll show us in a minute, that we can see other levels of the water vapor. But where it's black, it means that it's more dry. And so some drier air is wrapping in here. We can also see that some of these clouds are like lines, and that oftentimes happens when dry air is kind of like riding up and over, like little waves of dry air are kind of interacting with these outer bands. That helps deteriorate the storms, but at the same time, once they get close to land, if we have dry air and moist air really close to each other, really hot, really cold, those things mix faster and it makes stronger storms faster. But they'll be smaller, localized storms rather than these large floods, which are the more dangerous killer. So when it comes to storms, 90% of deaths occur in the floodwaters. So it's nice to be able to prepare for these very small storms, like how we can see then on the infrared, where I'm saying that those little localized pocket to strong storms can occur when we have that dry air interacting with that really moist, cooler air, and then this warmer air. So these little stronger storms are easier to prepare for than a massive flood event. So here we are then looking at the actual size of this thing. It's not that big. When we look at 1 degree, here we go. I'm going to change the way we're looking at it. I want to back up and be able to show us more here. So if I go back to windy, we can see a lot more. Now, yeah, if we zoom out and we look at the wind speeds at different levels, we can get an idea then of which one of those tracks is a little more probable now that we saw some of that dry air out ahead. So I'll go back to today, first of all, because that's a forecast for much later from the European model. As you can see down in this corner, I suppose now you can see it. There's ability on windy.com to change which forecast you're looking at. Now, you would hope that the now data would be the same on all of them, but even that is a little different. What they're doing is getting this through those different they're different sources of data, and so their own satellites might look different. And that's why what I do is I use that European and then I switch to wind gusts rather than winds, and that has proven over and over again to be usually within about 10 to 15 miles per hour of accurate. So here we are with some of those internal wind speeds right now at about 180 kilometers per hour, 171 right there. So we're in the southern hemisphere, with this storm. We can see a lot of those stronger winds on the leading side with these storms a lot of the time. So as this continues to head westward, that's what we'll be watching for. Now, cruising up in the atmosphere, you can go to the wind section. You can't be on the wind gusts when doing this, but you can then use a little toggle. Again, I'll move this over so you can see it, and you can go up and up. And so around 500 or 600 millibars, or PA, you might see there for pascals, same kind of number system. That's where we start to see where the bulk of these storms live, like the most of the clouds and moisture, the stuff that really guides it. And so if we see blues out ahead, that's usually telling me that that's the path of least resistance. If we see other big forces, like this one, kind of out ahead or anywhere near, really, that is kind of like tells me these are like grinds on a clock, or you can think of them in so many different ways, but they do all push off each other. So this one might have to ride up over this storm. But if this storm moves faster and kind of, to me, I can see already it wants to pull in with what's going on to the south, then this one will be able to continue more westward, and this will just kind of bump out of its way. And eventually, in a couple of days, we'll be seeing that this blue, which is representing very calm wind, almost none, that'll kind of get more wide. And also, things will get less windy here in these islands in which we could be seeing some of the stronger storms and offshore storms from Freddy. So zooming out even more, and I'll play this out and see what the model says, because I kind of, I think if I zoom out, I still think the same thing. And, even really far away, up, excuse me, way up toward the north, these jets can play a big role in where storms will go also, because if we have a big trough, it's called, when these storms come down this way, and you see the whites there, that could end up digging and pushing down and actually forcing this to go a little bit more south. But now playing this model out, I do think, yeah, that this storm, a whole nother cyclone that is deteriorating now as it gets colder, it's going to mostly be pulled down into this. And then Freddy will mostly just continue totally westward, would be my guess for the next couple days until we get to here. So that would be on the weekend. Try to keep my mouse in place, and yeah, I'm guessing like right around here. So we'll see what this says for Sunday. This is a fun game to play. I just can't seem to keep my mouse in place because the cord's like all tangled up with my microphone cord and all the other ones I use for work. But yeah, so that blue did move much more southward. It did go over those islands, like I was guessing based on the current situation. So now we're looking ahead to the weekend, and then in this part of the world, because I'm on East Coast time in the U.S. right now, then we're gonna jump ahead about a half a day to hit Africa time. Oh wow, look at me and my forecasting. It's like me and the European are almost always totally in sync. Too banane. So not cool though when we see the whites. I see some whites popping up there. That always means danger zone. Now that's not even on the. That's up high in the sky, but yeah, that probably means that ew, yucky. Of course, Freddy's gonna get yucky and gross. This is not fun. I'm sorry, guys. I wish there could be more dry air wrapping in. That's one thing that would help deteriorate this. The water is warm, yucky stuff here. So the thing is just to prepare and know that I'm going to stop this right now. Know that by the weekend, people in Madagascar, especially, so these, by the way, these islands down here, they're not going to get the strongest wind. They're going to get those thunderstorms and some heavy rains, torrential downpours. Now, if this gets a little closer to the island, of course, if that eye wall was closer, then they will have the stronger winds and storm surge, that extra flooding from the wall of water that builds up with these strong winds. But I don't think that's going to happen. I hope it's not going to happen. I will keep tabs on all of these things and share what kind of water level changes we should be seeing. But right around here, then, for the weekend, we would be seeing thunderstorms and some heavy rain events. Now, Madagascar, people along the slopes, especially, are probably going to want to be thinking about landslides if you're on a slope, especially. And then they've just changed their service here on windy.com to start charging for things beyond that. So what I have is up until Tuesday without that little overlay of stuff, but it can still work ahead. And so what happens is when these storms are going to ride into these mountains here, it's going to cause a lot of excess rain. So extra rain falling and pooling up downstream. So if you are somebody that lives along the rivers here or any kind of a drainage area, that's going to be an area that can also have the flooding from the strong wind plus the extra rain falling from down the mountains. So these areas could get very dangerous and then pooling up into some bays. But as far as exact track goes at that point, I have not thought about an entire week out yet with this track. I will look at a few more things and post something on my Facebook page about that to see exactly where I think a landfall could be coming into play. I feel much more confident with what I've seen so far to analyze that this is likely going to be north of these islands. I had, made my guess and that did drift that way. So looking ahead, things can change with all of this land mass coming into play. We get some of the wind hitting the mountains and actually pushing back into the storm. So that's why we see them quickly deteriorate. So we'll see a landfall, and then right away after it hits the mountains, the wind speeds drop down dramatically. But the heavy rain and the flooding will not stop. And once again, that is the more dangerous and life threatening thing that comes along with these storms. So at that point, South Africa will then be preparing for some very strong thunderstorms. Now, I'll switch back to right now with the satellite on the infrared so we can see whether day or night just how strong these storms are already. So just to reiterate, Freddy has a very distinct eye wall and it is already strong. It will grow stronger while heading north of these islands here, but creating thunderstorms by the weekend. and then crossing over Madagascar, somewhere around this zone, probably with a landfall having wind speeds very strong, more than 200 kilometers per hour is possible, especially with the wind gusts up the mountains. Now, satellite shows there's already a lot of strong thunderstorming going on where we have these dark reds are areas that are very tall clouds and thunderstorms in many cases. And so with that, once Freddy gets over there, we'll be able to tap into extra moisture and possibly even grow larger on the radar, looking a lot bigger. Now, unfortunately, there's not radar available for this part of the world. So when I come over here and I toggle onto the radar, there's nothing available outside of these islands, which do have those domes that I talked about at the beginning of the live, but Africa does not have any of those radomes available. So we are only relying on satellite data. I've had a lot of questions about that lately. So these radar domes go out in a circle, like I shared about earlier, and that's why we get these groupings of them. But in this part of the world, we've got to stick to satellite in most cases. There are some other ways that you can access other forms of visualizing what's going on there weather-wise from the satellite information, those satellites out in space. So I will go ahead, post something up on to my Facebook here pretty quickly, probably make this the background here. Then there's no new cyclones, woohoo, for the South Pacific. That's great. After Gabrielle did a number on Auckland again, though, they'd already been flooded so badly that luckily this last storm was not so rainy, and it didn't have any lives lost there for New Zealand, but it did just cause a lot more destruction. So I'll be live on this one once again, so go ahead and hit subscribe to this channel and the notification bell if you want to be able to catch this live stream once it gets to about here next week. And these have 200 kilometer per hour wind speeds, at least the gusts, it'll be very close to that. That's when I'll start the live stream, and you can catch this non-stop, silent, and sometimes with my forecasting on this YouTube channel. So have a nice day, everybody. Figure out if you need to prepare for things or reach out to loved ones to prepare for possibly harvesting farm, their harvest soon, or else, preparing for landslides, or maybe people who live along the slopes or, areas that are probably going to be flooding here. Maybe you can get over to different parts of the island or safer zones before this hits. So now would be a good time to prepare. We have about a week. So I wish everybody the best with this. I'll continue updating. This is your